here's the thing, though. You might not remember this from this Dawn of Justice,
I didn't
but
see Dawn of Justice.
okay. But in
It was Batman v Superman.
yeah, okay, Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, and and
Oh,
it,
was that the subtext of it?
yes, that was
Oh,
the subtitle.
dumb.
Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. You did see
You
this
thought it should
movie.
have been Save Martha.
All right, so next up we have a delving deeper. And so, Alex, I thought I would tell you a little bit about my own personal experience before we get into the meat and potatoes of this. All right?
Okay.
Okay, so I just saw the new Spider-Mans. It's
Which one's that?
the
I
new
don't remember.
the newest Spider-Man.
Which Spider-Man is that?
that would
The
be
name of that one.
that would be the No Way Home. The No Way Home.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the Spider-Man No Way
I
Home.
can't keep up. There's been a bunch lately.
That's kind of what I'm getting to.
Okay.
But basically, so I I don't want to do too many spoilers, but I think that they've pretty much already spoiled this. But in case you are wondering, the storyline in Spider-Man No Way Home sees the current iteration of the Marvel Cinematic Universe's Spider-Man, because of some multiverse of madness stuff going on.
Is this a continuation from Into the Spiderverse?
No,
Okay, just checking.
no, that's a whole other thing.
Okay.
We're gonna get something on that.
Is this Miles Morales?
No, this is still very much Peter Parker. And Peter Parker and Peter Parker. Because what they did in this is to try and kind of bring everything, I guess, back into the fold now that Disney's working with everybody, and to try and bring it all into the MCU. If you remember the older, like Mark Webb and then Sam Raimi films, where Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield were Spider-Man and Amazing Spider-Man. Well, they and a lot of the villains from those original films, those earlier films, come into this. And so you get to have Spider-Man interacting with other Spider-Man. You have like 3 Peter Parkers, and Dr. Octopus and Green Goblin, all the actors coming back to play all these roles, because now everything's kind of the multiverse kind of starts to fold in on itself, because Peter couldn't decide who he wanted to remember who he was. So there's that whole thing.
Okay.
So I kind of knew that this was the setup for the movie. And so I thought, well, it would be really great if we went back and we watched the older movies first. So I watched the first 3 Spider-Mans with the Tobey Maguire.
Yep.
And then
Those are the ones that I remember because they came out when I was in high school, maybe? I don't remember what year those came out.
2002, 04, and 06, I want to say.
Oh, yeah. Okay, high school.
Yep. And then I watched The Amazing Spider-Mans, where Andrew Garfield was the Spider-Mans. And then also, because it was available on one of my streaming services.
One of them. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. I also, because it's also kind of wrapped up with Spider-Man, is the Venom films. So there were 2 of
I have
those.
not seen that
Yeah.
yet. Apparently it was good. Anyways.
So there were the 2 Venom films. And then, of course, I have to watch the first 2 Tom Holland movies now.
I heard those were also good.
They're very good. I like Tom Holland a lot, and that iteration. So I started to realize before I even see No Way Home, which I then watched, I needed the context in some way, shape, or form of like 7 other movies. No, 9 other movies.
So it's like it's like prepping for watching Endgame by watching all the other MCU movies before it.
Yeah,
Okay.
because before Endgame, there were like 23 Marvel films.
Right.
And
I haven't seen Endgame. I need to catch up on my MCU.
yeah, there's a lot going on. And now of course, it's not just the movies, because when you start to see the stuff that's going on, it's also all the television shows on like Disney Plus that all wrap in, because now that also influences the movies, and characters from the movies are also involved in the shows.
It's a bit much to get into.
It's a lot, especially because now it's becoming more obvious in like Multiverse of Madness 2 that the X-Men, like from the X-Men films, are going to be revolving in. So now it's like I gotta go back and watch all the X-Men films to get the context for this.
So, anyways, back on point.
Yeah, well, this is actually on point, but
hold on point there. Is the No Way Home Tom Holland, Andrew Garfield, and Tobey Maguire Spider-Man?
Yes.
Then?
Yeah.
Okay. It's Tom Holland continuing to be the current Spider-Man.
As far as I am aware.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Continue then.
That's okay. As far as I know, there's no stopping the Spider. This is sort of like the arc of at least the 3 home movies, but I imagine he's still going to be Spider-Man for a bit. But anyway, so this got me to thinking about a term that we have for this phenomenon, where I have to see a bunch of other works to get the context for a current one. And it's a term called intertextuality. That's your word of the day.
Word of the day.
Intertextuality.
Dude. TPK word of the week.
TPK word of the week. Enjoy. Roll for vocabulary.
Roll for copyright.
Intertextuality is the idea that you take previous texts or works as a reference point, almost a shorthand for storytelling in another work. So in stuff like in No Way Home, when a Tobey Maguire Spider-Man or an Andrew Garfield Spider-Man does something, you're relying on the fact that the audience is familiar with stuff that happened in movies that came beforehand.
Okay.
Yeah. When Green Goblin is having like a crisis or something in this, it's revolved around the idea that he was going insane because of the serum that he took in the first movie way back.
So, I already see something with this, which makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I assume the previous iterations of Spider-Man, and I haven't seen the Tom Holland ones. I don't know what the first Tom Holland Spider-Man movie started with. But I know for the previous 2, they were like, all right, we need to go over Spider-Man's origin stories.
Right. So here's the thing, is that in the Tom Holland films, they don't.
Okay.
They don't.
Because Tobey Maguire starts off, that was the first one. So, it was like, all right, here's his origin story. Uncle Ben being a wrestler, whatever. And then I know that Andrew Garfield also did the Uncle Ben, whatever. It was like a rehash telling you the same story again.
Yeah.
So I assume the intertextuality, you don't need that. It wouldn't be that instead of rehashing all the original content, you need to understand this. It just assumes you know this.
Right. There's even, to try and kind of drive this home, a part where somebody dies that Peter knows in the movie, and he's trying to cope with that. And so Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man is like, yeah, I lost Uncle Ben, and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man is like, I lost Gwen Stacy. And so they're using that as a context point that we've gone through this previously. But of course, the text of that comes from previous films that are not this film.
Right.
It's,
on the flip side,
yeah.
I believe DC doesn't really do a lot of this. They do a lot of this. They don't do a lot of the rehashing. Like, you don't see every Batman movie starting out with Batman's origin story. despite them going through a different Batman every fucking 3 years.
Yeah. Well, I have not seen the new Batman film. I
have not either.
I do plan on watching it. I would be very sad though if it starts out where I have to frickin' watch this damn origin story of Batman.
Yeah.
I don't need it.
Well, if you remember, like, Batman, I think we talked about this before. Batman v Superman.
Yeah.
It relied on context from Superman, Man of Steel.
Yes.
Which it's fine if you're doing like an origin story as your point of context, I think. But in that case, we don't need to go off on a huge tangent here. But I saw Batman v Superman without having seen Man of Steel. So at the beginning of Batman v Superman, I had zero context clues of what the hell was going on.
Right.
And it was only through like a half hour of watching it and getting clues. I'm like, oh, I think this is taking place right after Man of Steel.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing, though. You might not remember this from this Dawn of Justice.
I didn't see Dawn of Justice.
Okay, but it
was Batman v Superman.
Yeah, okay. Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. And
was that the subtext of it?
Yes, that was the subtitle.
Dumb.
Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. You did see this.
You thought it should have been Save Martha.
There's like several Maggie Mayfish videos she did that was she just shouts "Save Martha" at the end of every single one of them for the media analysis. But at any rate, so anyway, there is a point in that though where he's having a flashback sequence and he watches his mother and father die in the alley and her pearls spill on the ground, like the origin story you see of every single Batman. So I'd be very sad if it turns out in the Robert Pattinson one, I have to watch this whole friggin' origin story again.
Anyways, we can get back on Spider-Man though.
Anyway.
That was just a divergent thought.
Sure. No, and you know what? It's pertinent. But long story short is then in the Tom Holland ones, when he's originally introduced in Civil War, he's already Spider-Man.
Right.
Already Spider-Man. We've already established that. And so they don't really even mention Uncle Ben, really, or what happened to him. But anyway, so in order to really understand, like, when they have, like, the little clip of Venom at the end, you have to, like, have at least some kind of a knowledge of previous movies that Venom was in. In order to understand why all these villains are important, like, you can watch that one movie, but you don't really get the full context unless you've seen everything else that came before. So, since this seems to happen a whole lot nowadays, especially with, one, the cinematic universes, but also just with the remakes and the reboots that also seem to rely on the previous work to give, like, references and Easter eggs and stuff like that, I started to think about how this would relate to actual storylines and narrative when you're building a game. Because I feel like we do this subconsciously without even realizing it.
I've definitely done it not subconsciously.
Okay. Please elaborate.
Well, in previous iterations of game worlds I've built as a DM for D&D, obviously, I would use the same world in different iterations of the same world. We've gone over this before, I think, where I would be, all right, you're taking place here in time, and the events that happen will also go into something that, like, my players don't need to have the knowledge of, oh, this thing happened in the world's past.
Yeah.
But I use the iterations before to inform the world of what happens now.
Right.
So, I had my main game, then I had another game that took place in the past that forms what happens in that main game, like the reasons things were the way they were. And then I had a game that I want to take place in the future, dictated by what happens then and things other games set in that world did.
Sure.
I would consider that similar. You don't have to have the player context for it, but as a DM, you can use that context, I think, to make one continuous world.
Right. Right, I understand that. I'm also just thinking about how a lot of the game worlds that we're used to are based on something previously. Like if you look at a Dungeons and Dragons, there's a whole lot of influence and almost a reference point to things like Lord of the Rings,
Yes.
where if I say an orc, for a lot of people who are not familiar with Dungeons and Dragons and how they evolved that concept of orcs as a race, you'd probably automatically revert back to thinking about Lord of the Rings and what was set up there. When I start talking to you about elves and dwarves and, big bad evil guys and stuff, you probably immediately think of that to start.
But as long as you don't talk to us about hobbits, because that is legally distinct
From halflings?
from halflings
It's true.
for copyright and trademark reasons.
I mean, functionally. But at any rate, that's... You do... And that's funny because I think you do have to explain to people a little bit more about what a halfling is than you would have to explain to them what an elf or a wizard or a dwarf or a fighter or a ranger is.
Or gnome.
Or a gnome. Or a gnome. Well, no, I think that the one problem with the gnomes is that everybody always is going to be thinking about the little red hats.
Just give them garden gnome hats. It's fine.
I need to get myself a garden gnome hat for Max.
You do. It's a tuba.
It's a tuba that I wear on my head.
Mm.
I've got that Zulkun organ. I can put it on top of my head.
Perfect.
I'll paint it red. It'll be amazing. That's how I do my thunder spells.
I'll make sure you get a hat of distraction plus -1.
Oh, good. Well, I already get like a plus 50 to distraction, so.
True.
That's great.
Anyways.
Or confusion. That's intertextuality right there. But I kept thinking about it, not just in terms of like, I said something in a previous thing, so we're going to bring it back, but really that we're so used to like absorbing media in different kinds of forms that it's going to become kind of like touchstones that you figure other people are going to be able to latch onto, and that you hope that you almost start to rely on people knowing reference points and things that previously existed in order to explain what's going on. And I feel like in some ways that might be a pitfall that you fall into.
Yeah. I know we've talked about on the show and when we talked about reboots, remasters, remakes, which is also, again, tangential but on point to this, I think, a little bit.
Sure.
Where I had talked about DMC Devil May Cry.
Okay, yep.
And I think if you were someone new coming to the series, you'd be like, I don't get some of these nods and Easter eggs and, some of these points that if you were someone who's played the other games in the series before that, you'd realize that, oh, I get this, I get that, that makes sense. Oh, callback, Easter egg, whatever.
Oh, sure.
And like for me, having played the other games, I looked at it and went, this is actually a decent like origin story, where if you know the other parts of the story, this fills in the gaps you're missing, kind of in a lot of ways. But I think if you're someone new to the series, or just that didn't really pay attention to the story much, you might be like, this makes no sense, this is weird, I don't like this.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me too of, have you ever watched like the reboot version of something where you had never seen the original film or television show? Like they do it a lot where they start making series off of like a movie that came around once upon a time.
Sure.
And
I mean, I've never seen the original producers, but I've seen the newer producers.
Okay. Well, here's an example I'll give you is we ended up watching a show that's on the Disney Plus, and it's Turner and Hooch. They made a television show of Turner and Hooch. Here's the thing, I had not seen the original show or the original movie, so eventually I watched the movie because we were watching the show, which of course is the reason why they do these things. It's like we can get the old media and we can sell it to people again. But the thing about it is I realized, okay, there's obvious, I feel like they're trying to do Easter eggs and references and trying to elicit something that I'm supposed to know. The problem is I don't. And that's not bad if it's like a contextual thing. Like, I think in games, if you want to do that to try and add flavor, that's fine. But if you start, this is why I say it's a trap. Because if it becomes how you tell the story, now people are going to get lost. Like, if my storyline and my characters and everything are reliant on something else in order to function, I no longer have a coherent narrative. I can't. It's like saying, oh yeah, 20% cooler, and here's the sparkles, the starburst, and people are going, okay, what's that supposed to actually mean? Oh, from Hoover and the vacuum cleaners back in the day. You don't remember that? No. What am I supposed to do with that information?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I totally understand that. It's nice as a side reference point, or, something that people might be able to latch onto for flavor, but there is a point where I think people start to rely on it so much where it becomes detrimental to actually being able to explain what's going on in the world itself. So I feel like that's something to be wary of when you're actually building your games. Is like, we love to reference stuff from the past. It's super fun, and it's super nostalgic, and we love our geek culture, but it can't be the entirety of what you do, or it's going to become a problem.
You can't just make an entire new thing based on callbacks to a previous thing.
Yeah, it's just call back the journey.
That becomes Family Guy.
That's his Family Guy, yeah. Just like a series of references.
Yeah, just a series. Have you ever seen that one? I know I haven't watched Family Guy in years now. There was one episode I think they did with the multiverse.
Okay.
I don't know how much Family Guy you've watched.
Less Probably than you, I'm sure.
Okay. Well, I don't know if you've seen this one. So there's one they did where Brian and Stewie, like time travel, or I think it's just multiverse hop.
Sure.
Because there's no coherent story really in Family Guy.
No.
It's just episodic, just like The Simpsons.
Yeah.
As these cartoons are. But Brian and Stewie go multiverse hopping, and in one of the multiverses they come in, they peek into their own house.
Mm-hmm.
So they see the Family Guy cast, everyone in there, the family, the Griffins and whatnot, and they're looking in the window, and then one of the characters will be like, "Hey, you remember the time we did this specific event?"
Yeah.
And then everyone stops, and they just sit there blankly, staring and just blinking for like 30 seconds.
Because it's supposed
and Brian
to
is,
yeah.
And Brian and Stewie are like, "What the fuck's going on?"
Yeah.
and I think Brian's like, "Is this whenever somebody makes a jump cut?
Yeah.
Is this whenever we're doing like a memory thing?" And then they do it again. And they're like, "Oh yeah, and remember that time they do that?" And then again, 30 seconds of blankness, and they're like, "This is fucking creepy."
Yeah.
Because the family's just sitting there for like 30 seconds of runtime, where in the actual show, like not in this episode, it would have been a callback, a reference, a skit, like these one-off little gags.
Yeah.
But in the context of someone else looking into it, it was, oh, they just stare blankly and have like this shared delusion for like 30 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like it becomes that.
Yeah.
If it's just a running game of callbacks, it's like, remember that time, and everyone's like, "Oh, time." We reminisce about it for 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and then all right, back to game. Oh, remember that time? And then it's that episode. I'll see if I can find the clip.
Yeah. It's one of those things where you start to kind of get into a pattern of saying, well, I could tell a cohesive storyline that's going to have rich narrative and character development, or I could just say, you're gonna fight Sauron now.
I think it'd be interesting
to
take
how it
away
works.
from this. Yeah. We're gonna take the Eagles some more. No, you're not. You're walking.
Let's talk about that over and over again
No.
about why you can't actually do the Eagles part.
So I think it'd be interesting in the case of using this as a point in games to not use that, but to kind of hand wavy it off. Maybe you could do like time skips.
Okay.
You know, sort of like the Brian and Stewie thing I just mentioned, but not like for that effect.
Sure.
Where, okay, we're gonna do this thing. You know, we plan to do this thing. You start on your journey, and then you skip forward 2 months, not just as a mechanic, which you can do. Oh, okay, your journey. You know, just kind of hand wave your journey away. All right, you did a couple things in your journey. We're not gonna do the whole journey because that's annoying, and travel is boring, and no one likes it. It would be all right, 2 months later, and then it's like, wait, what just happened over the last 2 months? It's like, who knows?
We don't know.
We'll come back to that later, perhaps. Like maybe you go 2 months later and you're sitting in a jail cell.
Yeah.
And then it's like, wait, why? And it's like, we'll get to that.
Yeah. We'll explain that later.
I feel like that could be an interesting plot device, although I think players might not enjoy it as much. You'd have to have good buy-in for it.
Sure.
Because otherwise they'd be like, wait, why am I in jail? I had no say over this.
Yeah.
You know, kind of deal.
And it turns out that the big bad guy was just that dude from Click. It was just Adam Sandler from Click, which is intertextual by its very nature, but you're just like skipping forward like a bunch of time.
Skipping big periods of your life.
The very popular, very good movie that was Click.
I saw it. It was entertaining.
It was fine, but I mean, it was fine.
Anyways.
But at any rate, yeah, I guess the takeaway that I'm hoping people get out of this, at least, is that you want to be mindful of, you know, what you're pulling from and making sure that it is not the entirety of what you're doing. Because if you have to spend more time explaining to people the references that you're making, or like trying to explain the world that you're building because of the reference you thought everybody got, then it's less time of actually doing the game, and that's a problem.
I think it works well for things that are actually a linear series.
Sure.
Where it's expected or presumed that you will start at the beginning and continue.
Mm-hmm.
But for things like movies, in this case, 3 different iterations of different movies,
Sure.
where you may not have seen the original content, because maybe you weren't alive then, for instance, or maybe you just weren't interested and this new one looks interesting.
Yeah.
In the case of Spider-Man, I think it's different. Like, if you were to say, you know, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, for instance, you could read all those books separately, and you could enjoy them, but there's a lot of references in them that rely on you having read the books in order to understand those references.
Oh yeah, book series in general are going to be like that.
Yeah, it's like if you read Game of Thrones out of order, you wouldn't know what the fuck is going on, or you would know what's going on, and you'd be like, "Oh, this is how we got here." I mean, it can work in some cases, but
well, I mean, in the case of Game of Thrones, it doesn't matter if you've read all the books because you still don't know what the fuck is going on. He never finished it. J.R.R. Tolkien never finished it, and if the show version of it, maybe we shouldn't bother.
I mean, you said J.R.R. Tolkien, by the way.
Oh yeah, sorry. George R.R. Martin. Yeah. There's too many RRs in fiction writing.
There's a reason for that.
Railroading?
Yeah, yes, but no. No, authors sell better when they've got a name and like 2 initials or whatever. Oh, for whatever reason, that's a thing.
Oh, okay.
That's why it's J.K. Rowling or George R.R. Martin or
R.A. Salvatore?
R.A. Salvatore or I forget Tolkien now.
J.R.R. Tolkien.
Thank you. Yeah, no, for some reason it just actually sells better.
E.L. James. Yeah, you're right. That is weird. I wonder why that is.
I do not know, and that's not a topic for today's episode.
We need to create like a fake writer, and his name is TTR Pog.
Or Pog.
Pog, yeah. Pogwatch. TTRP Gary. TTRP Gary.
We'll just do a fake book and sell it on Amazon.
Oh, Garriott. It could be TT Richard P Garriott.
No, it'll just be ST Unicorn.
ST Unicorn?
ST Unicorn.
Oh.
Or whatever.
No, I got it even better. Is ST Oopidly.
Okay. Anyways, let us know what you think about any of this in the comments or the Discord.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
And
if you abuse this, use this, or don't realize you've used it, or don't like it, even. Whatever you want.
Also kind of interested to see if you were to set up an actual game, like an actual campaign, around something that's a previous work. Like, to like, literally start at a starting point, like a Back to the Future. Ooh, a Back to the Future game. Or something to that effect. Do you have an idea in mind of what that previous work would be that you'd base it off of? And how much buy-in do people need for it? That's also a really good question, because I don't know the answer.